Welcome everyone to this edition of Soul Live. Welcome everyone in our studio and to you at home. My name is Trisha Kelly. This is Tom Kelly. And tonight we have a dear friend of ours by the name of Bhava Ram. And we welcome into the soul. So here we are. We've got a former war correspondent for NBC, someone who broke his back, has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, 2 years to live. And here he is, the picture of health. Where do we start?
Well, I wish we could have him show us a yoga pose right now and then go back to when he was in a body brace for 7 years and couldn't move, right?
Well, this is a yoga pose.
That's true.
Just being
One
seated
of the
here,
best
but for 7 years I was in a body brace that went from my knees right up to the sternum, a big clamshell it's called, like a Kevlar brace outside. So I couldn't move and I couldn't sit up to eat a meal, and I still ate and drank like a foreign correspondent when I was with NBC News, so I was always loosening that brace to make more room and more room. And my toes looked as far away as China. The idea of ever even reaching down and picking something up off the floor was impossible. I mean, I needed a cane to walk, and I couldn't sit up to eat or to visit with people. So because of yoga and a little bit of change in my life, I'll give you one yoga pose.
Okay.
Right? Now, if you could put the other leg around there, we'll have the rest of the interview. But let's roll back the film a little bit, Bhava. And so a war correspondent, and you were telling us just a few minutes ago, this was what you considered the golden age of being a war correspondent. What is it?
I was with the network during the real golden age, during the good times. I left my career because of a broken back and a failed back surgery in 1993. But back in those years, before then, we really had the capacity to cover a story with all the ammunition that we needed. Being a war correspondent, it wasn't the type of ammunition that you shoot with, but we had the equipment, we had the people, we had the backup. We could be in a very difficult situation, and we only had to service the main shows. NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, and the Today Show with Brian Gumbel and Jane Pauley. I don't even know if anyone will remember them now.
I think so.
Everybody's smiling.
And we hear you still have the voice.
Still have the voice.
You have the voice.
Today, the poor correspondents are running around servicing 10, 15 shows, all the cable news shows that are owned by the networks, and it's a different life and it's much more difficult. I admire them greatly because they're under a lot more stress.
So you were in the, what came first? I mean, you were in the Gulf War and you were exposed to some toxic radiation which wreaked havoc on your body. Did that come before your back broke?
No, my back actually broke in 1986, just after I came out of Afghanistan. I was there during the Soviet occupation. I was up in the mountains with the Mujahideen when Osama bin Laden was on the payroll of the CIA and was considered a good guy, helping us fight the Russians and push them out of Afghanistan. And I went on a vacation, and a tropical storm after that came up on my final day, and I was battening down storm windows. I fell off about a 12-foot ledge, landed on the base of my spine, and put a hairline fracture in my lowest lumbar vertebra. And being young and really oriented towards my career, I just lived with it. I gritted my teeth, and I worked for another 7 years in increasingly horrifying pain, and doing everything I could to be in denial, and chewing more and more pain medications the whole time, drinking a little more wine after the job at night. And I was in Manila, Philippines in 1993, covering the return of Imelda Marcos to the Philippines to try to take back the presidency after she and her husband had been overthrown. And I was just sitting, viewing videotape, file videotape, and that vertebra cracked in half. And I went down to the floor screaming, and I was medevaced out and subsequently had a failed surgery, which left me permanently disabled.
Did they operate you there in the Philippines, or did they bring you home?
They medevaced me back here. I came to San Diego because my family's here. had a failed surgery. And it wasn't until several years later, just after the birth of my son, who's here in the audience tonight. He had just been born, and I was very crippled, and it was about the only relationship I had left in my life. And a lump came up on my throat one morning, and it didn't go away, and after 4 or 5 months it got worse and worse, and I was eventually diagnosed with what was called terminal cancer from exposure to depleted uranium war tips used by the American forces in the Gulf War to pierce the Iraqi tanks. And it's killed thousands of people who were in the Gulf, soldiers. And I was told I wouldn't live for 2 years.
You killed the soldiers?
Many have died of exposure to this radiation in the Gulf. More than 10,000 according to the New York Times.
Wow, that's more than have passed away from the Afghanistan and Iraq war.
It is, it is.
So, before we get into the recovery and the healing and all that transformation that you had, truly a miracle. You were 10 years in some pretty intense areas of this world, weren't you?
I was.
And yet it seemed like that was what you were meant to do.
It was my entire identity. I felt whenever I was in a war zone or a conflict or being an investigative reporter that I was exactly where I was meant to be. It was like going into a shavasana for me, into a samadhi. It was exactly what I was meant to do. It was my complete identity. And I never felt overly brave or courageous, and I never felt fearful. I just felt this is exactly where I belong. Revolutions in El Salvador and Nicaragua, apartheid in Africa, drug wars in South America, the war in Afghanistan, and turmoil in China and Vietnam, much after the Vietnam War. And I always felt comfortable. It's ironic, given all the danger and how many times I almost lost my life, that it all happened on a vacation.
Yeah.
The downfall and the end of that identity.
So you were in the brace, you were healing from the back injury, the broken back, and then you got the cancer diagnosis at the same time?
I was in the brace, and I was told that I would never get better. And I was very depressed because I had lost this career I loved so much. And again, it was my whole identity. And I was in the prime of my life, my early 40s. So it was like having your whole identity snapped in half along with your spine. So I was also in some profound denial. And I didn't notice it that much because I was given so many pain medications by Western medicine. Prozac, Vicodin, Valium, morphine, all together. I mean, I had jars and jars and jars. I couldn't take all of the drugs that I was prescribed.
And it probably didn't work completely anyway.
Well, it masked my soul. And it kept me from, being really depressed or knowing I was depressed. And then came the diagnosis of this terminal cancer that was metastasized throughout my whole body. Again, just after the birth of my boy, my only child. And he was really, at that point, my only relationship in the world was with him. And so that was challenging.
So what was the spark then in this dark night of the soul, to say the least? What was the inner something that said, I'm going to put up a fight here, or whatever was the thing that because if you gave into this, you wouldn't be here today.
I was falling into an abyss, really free falling, especially after the diagnosis of this terminal cancer.
Right.
Metastasized through my body. And more and more crippled, more and more pain, more and more medications, and just basically waiting to die. And my son turned 2, and he came into the family room where I was lying in my usual position in my body brace on the couch in the early morning. And I could see suddenly it dawned on him. Suddenly he looked at me, and even at 2, he knew for the first time, my daddy is in trouble. And he trembled a little bit and got some tears in his eyes and said in his beautiful, tiny little voice, "Get up, Daddy. Get up, Daddy." And that went just right into the center of a soul I didn't even know that I had at that time in my life. And I began saying that over and over to myself for several weeks, and finally, still falling into the abyss and called, "Get up, Daddy." Finally, I decided at least I need to get off all of these drugs that have so confused and angered and made me so toxic, and die with dignity for my son. And I went and checked into a rehab unit to completely cold turkey detox, which is another story. A real dark night of the soul. Demons are the gargoyles you see on these old buildings in Europe. Now I know why and how they were envisioned, because I saw them. And after 10 days of that, I hobbled out of my room and didn't know what to do with my life. Now what? Now I'm in horrible pain. I'm dying of cancer. I still have a broken back. I still can't sit up and do anything. What do I do? And a doctor came to me and said, "We've just started this experimental clinic right across the hall that uses ancient Eastern modalities and modern holistic Western techniques blended together. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sign me up." It was like a lifeline. So I took a hotel room very nearby the hospital and started in that program. So it was my son that made me want to live and find some dignity in a life that had lost all of its meaning and all of its dignity except for him. And in this pain management program, I began to find my soul again that I had lost as a result of all those medications and all those years of pain and darkness. And that was the journey that ultimately brought me back.
Did they use meditation to help you with your pain management?
The first thing that I did was go into a biofeedback room where they put electrodes on you and they can take your galvanic skin temperature and your pulse rate and your brain wave rates. And they had me listen to an audio tape, a guided visualization, by Dr. Emmett Miller, who's now a very good friend of mine. I'll be at Esalen teaching with him next month. And everything changed when I listened to that. I think it was the first time in my adult life that I'd ever relaxed and let go. Because you don't relax in a war zone. I might have been in the zone and somewhat comfortable, but you don't. And it had a profound effect on me, and the response was pretty profound. And so I started doing that every day and every night, listening, and I immediately bought his book and read that and started integrating some of those things into my very infantile portion of my journey. And it wasn't until 2 months later that they had me go into a yoga room. Now, I came of age in the 1960s. I remember hearing a lot about yoga. I was a love child. You know, I was a hippie, I was an anti-war protester, but I never tried yoga in my life. And I walked into the little yoga room, which was for a private healing session before the teacher came in. And it was, again, like a spear into my heart, just like, "Get up, Daddy." And something in me knew, this is going to heal me. I just had a knowing. And as an old investigative reporter and war correspondent, I would scoff at someone saying that, like, this sounds ridiculous to me. So there was the ego of the former war correspondent saying, that's ridiculous. And then there was this deeper part, maybe down here, saying, no, this is your path.
You know, as you tell the story, I never thought of it this way, and I've heard your story before, is that what a divine setup, or what a contract you had signed coming into this life, now seeing the depth of who you are as a yogi, that just didn't happen in this life, but you came in, and I believe the divine knew that there was a big chunk of karma, so to speak, that needed to be cleared away, but since you had been a yogi before in many lives, they figured, let's give him the whole ball of wax. Let's do the whole thing. I know he'll get through it. And when he's through it, then that part of karma and that kind of situation is done for forever. So I'm just...
I hope you're right.
No, that's what I'm feeling. And it's true, though, for every student that comes into a yoga place, to some degree or another, it's just not, I'm going to go take a yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
Because the yoga masters that are behind every step and breath that we take in this human form, because they've walked the path to enlightenment, are behind the scenes, looking at the big picture, looking at our karmas, looking at why we've been sick since we were young, or we've been abundant since we were young, and they're looking at how they can kind of do a similar thing as they did with you. How are we going to burn up all these tendencies of the past and start fresh with a new attitude to go inside toward the soul?
Well, I think there's a lot to what you're saying. When I teach a class or a workshop, I'll often say, you may think you came to yoga because you wanted to be more flexible, or you wanted to have a little less stress, or you wanted a tighter tummy, or something like that, be stronger. But you came to yoga because you're suffering. Everybody walks into a yoga class because they feel a sense of suffering. They feel a call from their soul, because no matter how much abundance we have in our lives, things just aren't working out if we're disconnected from that soul.
Wow.
Well, I'm sure, I'm asking this question, though, for a lot of people want to know, how did you heal a fracture?
It was a long journey. You know that yoga teaches us to have tapas, to have this inner fire, to have this self-discipline, and to really sustain it. About a month into the yoga program at that pain center that I went to, they closed the whole center because the insurance companies wouldn't reimburse for these alternative modalities. One of the people in the program committed suicide. Oh. Another person ended up going back to alcohol and drugs. There were only 4 or 5 of us in there. I don't know what happened to 2 others. I went home and took a small office in my house, had everything torn out, and I built what I called my Himalayan cave. And I started going in there every morning at 3 a.m., and I would do practices, not just asana and pranayama and breath work, but deep meditative practices and self-affirmation practices. I would then get up when my boy woke up and get him fed, and he would go to preschool, boom, back in my cave.
Yogi from past lives, I told you. That's not an ordinary dude doing that, you know.
Pick him up from preschool, down for a nap, boom, back in my cave. After dinner, back in my cave. I did this for 2 years. I fasted greatly. I was 225 pounds when I was in that body brace. I went down to 140. I called that my organic chemotherapy. And I actually had to eat a lot to build back up to this big 160 pounds I am now. So that was a big part of it, was that daily dedication without ever wanting the outcome immediately. About a year into it, I knew my back was healed. If I had an x-ray or bone scan, an orthopedic surgeon would say, we need to do another surgery on your back's broken. But because of being more flexible, given yoga, being a little stronger in those muscles, being more balanced and having alignment, I never, ever, ever feel any back pain.
Is that right? You've been free of back pain?
Free of back pain.
For how long?
A decade. The cancer came a little bit later. That was still in me, and I could still feel it, and that's when I started the very profound fasting and veganism. I'm no longer vegan because I got too skinny, but I did that for quite a while, so I completely purified my body over and over again. And I actually had another little epiphany that the war correspondent would scoff at. I was just before sunrise on San Diego Bay, I would go down there every morning too from my cave and do a practice at the sunrise. And I felt what felt like the essence or the demon of cancer leave my body. I just had a moment where I knew it was gone. A year later, I went to see the oncologist who had been seeing me during all this time, and I hadn't seen him for a year because I had gone into detox and into my cave. And I walked into his office for an appointment, 80 pounds lighter, and now
And you walked.
a yogi, and I walked, and
Without
no
a brace.
body brace. And they were astonished. They didn't recognize me. And they had put my file in the file of deceased people. Because he said, you just are not going to survive from this. I mean, he was a very good oncologist, so he was pretty surprised. And I shared the whole story with him, and at the end he said, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing
Keep doing it, right?
And I haven't been back since.
Right.
Now, you somehow, how did that, to travel, you ended up traveling to India to study Ayurveda?
Well, along the way in that healing journey, I also began to study Ayurveda deeply, and I integrated Ayurvedic practices with my yogic practices because these two sister sciences are really inextricable.
What is a simple definition of Ayurveda, then?
The science of life. Ayurveda is about bringing complete harmony in your life with the rhythms of Mother Nature.
Okay.
Getting up at the right time, going to bed at the right time, eating the right foods, having the right thoughts. There's a whole psychology behind it too. Settling yourself down. Most of the things that we call yoga are Ayurveda. Asanas are basically an Ayurvedic practice so that we can become stronger and more flexible so that we can finally hold still and not feel like we have to scratch and our hips and our groin hurt. And then we can go into yoga, which is you two know so well because you've established this beautiful place on this premise. Then you go into the soul. But you can't go into the soul if you have a horribly distracted mind and a body that's uncomfortable and has aches and pains and itches and twitches.
So you found your way, then you got into a certain level of health, and then you went to travel. Did you get, are you, gosh, would they, how, they don't give MAs or degrees? Do you ever get degrees in Ayurveda, or did you study it for yourself?
I studied for
primarily?
myself for a long time, but ultimately I met one of the greatest Ayurvedic masters in the world today, Dr. David Frowley, also known as Vamadeva Shastri, who is the head of the American Institute of Vedic Studies, who was the one who invited me and my wife Laura to India. I studied under him and became a graduate of his institute in advanced yoga and Ayurveda. Subsequently, we hosted the Kerala Ayurveda Academy of India, one of the greatest Ayurvedic teaching schools in India, at our home in San Diego for a year-long study, and we took all the courses as well, and so my wife and I are both graduates of the Kerala Ayurveda Academy.
We know you're great cooks because we got to,
Yeah,
Ayurvedic cooks, we got to experience that firsthand.
You are what you eat.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So here you are in this amazing story. You met your beautiful soulmate or twin flame, or however you want to say it, your Laura, who actually, the two of them actually got married here at the Soul Center.
Exactly the
by
spot,
Tom.
right?
Right where we're sitting, they married.
Yeah.
And now, through ginseng yoga, now you've written 2 books. You've got the 3rd one. Tell us about the work that you do, supporting people through their transitions. But Bhava's classes in ginseng, you can't get in; they're packed, and we can see why.
Well, I think when anyone goes through a healing journey, they feel compelled from their soul to give back. And I certainly felt that tremendously because, as you mentioned, they gave me the whole ball of wax along the way. And my wife and I established the Deep Yoga School of Healing Arts, and we're business partnered with Ginseng Yoga Studio in San Diego. So we do what we call Mastery of Life trainings, that are yoga teacher trainings or just for mastering your own life. Our subtext to that would be owning your power and living your truth. We lead retreats. We teach in India as well, in Rishikesh, and we're on the faculty for the International Yoga Festival that's held there at the end of every February.
So you're heading out then?
We will be going next year, not this year.
Okay.
I needed to stay home this year.
Did you?
It's been too much doing. And the first 2 books were on yoga and Ayurveda, basically with my own personal experiences woven in, not meant to be academic treatises, but more speaking heart to heart about how this ancient wisdom applies to our modern times and to our lives. The 3rd book, which will be out this year, is the journey that we've been discussing, from war correspondent to the abyss to clawing my way back up to a new life as Bhava Ram.
So Bhava, for so many people here and then also at home, maybe are at the stage of the broken back, or might be at the stage of the diagnosis that is devastating. From all of your learnings, what and your experience, what would you say to them when at this huge crossroads it looks so like they're falling into the abyss?
Might be a broken heart.
I would say to anyone who is really suffering a life crisis that you have more power and more capacity and potential than perhaps you have ever allowed yourself to believe. One of the reasons that I feel comfortable in telling my story is because I don't feel that I'm anybody special in any way. I haven't done something that you can't do, or the people watching this interview can't do, or anyone who watches this on your Soul TV can't do. We all have this incredible power inside of us from which we've largely been disenfranchised by our culture, by mass media, by the assault on our senses 24 hours a day that makes our minds so distracted and makes us so dependent on external things that we've lost our power. And we really have more than we know. Fortunately, I was able to find that power within me and find my way back. And my main message is that we all have this. This doesn't mean that everyone will survive from terminal cancer or will completely heal a broken back. But I know that everyone can make tremendous strides from where they are. You are not lost if you are suffering. In fact, if you're suffering, it's good news. It's a blessing. You should say, thank you, suffering, because it is a catalyst for you to find who you really are. It is a catalyst for you to find your strength, for you to find your authenticity, your true calling in life, to take charge of your life, and to make the changes that you need to make. Because all suffering is also a signal that we're out of balance, that we need to make changes. You know, what we all want is old behaviors, new results, right? I want this, but I'm not changing that. Well, it doesn't work. But when we own our power, we're able to implement new behaviors, and lo and behold, miracles happen. Change happens, shift happens, and we have a capacity to heal, and beyond that, to grow, and beyond that, to manifest our greatest potential in our lives, whatever that may be. And that's why I say that yoga really is about owning our power and living our truth.
See, a perfect blend, your perfect blend of East and West now. Because the East has given you the ways and the means and the art, the science of Ayurveda and yoga. And I know how even one yoga class, you showing up to share with the students in a yoga class, integrates all this for you. Because this science is alive, right? It is the art of alchemy. It is the art of coming into a class, no matter what state of mind we're in, what emotions are going on in our heart, what's going on in the world. And by the end of that class, there can be a new state of consciousness. Now that's a miracle right there. A higher level of consciousness. And you feel it every class, don't you?
You do. And I would say that yoga is a radical revolution of humankind, even though it's an ancient practice. If we all can come into this place where we live more authentically, more from our heart, more along the guidelines that this great wisdom of yoga and Ayurveda offers us, we can, one being at a time, change the world.
Yeah.
And we need to change the world. We need more peace in the world. We need to treat Mother Earth with more loving kindness and with more respect and humility. And yoga asks this of all of us. We need to shift from being a self-centered, self-indulgent culture to a people who understand that it's not just nice and poetic to say we're all one.
Yeah.
It's the truth. We are all one. We are all part of one organism. We are all indigenous. No matter if we've traveled halfway around the world and we live somewhere else, we are indigenous to the mother. And we have to come back to that consciousness. And the more of us who do, the more we will step into the next phase of humankind.
And you know, the Western piece of that, when someone has the discipline to want to be a foreign war correspondent, because I'm sure you had a lot of competition. You had to work hard, you had to be good at you had to be great at what you did. That takes discipline, it takes visioning. Those same qualities then came back for you to dig yourself out of the hole. So it really is a beautiful balance of East and West, of you know, that can-do-it attitude with the ancient science of healing.
And I think that's what comes to my mind too is the ancient scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, you know, which is the essence of the four Vedas and the essence of the yoga philosophies and the systems and all that. It's just compacted into those 700 verses. And the very first verse, you being a correspondent, and I'm sure that you did your best to stay objective, right? And just report the facts, ma'am, right? Just give the facts. That's the very first phrase. It's looking at this field of battle that we have physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, called Kurukshetra. And it's that introspective part of our nature, really the soul intuition, that's asking, how did I do in this field of battle today? And so you now being this blend of the war correspondent, or someone who can now look at the battle between the soul and the ego, and now taken on more of the Arjuna, or the self, or that true nature of you. I just see you as a classic Bhagavad Gita example now.
Arjuna lives.
I think we all are. We're all Arjuna.
Right.
And we all need to turn the reins over to Krishna. And as I said before, I feel like we've been disenfranchised from our power. Because I'd like to say to anyone who ever watches this, don't believe that you don't have discipline. Don't believe that you lack the capacity to change. Don't listen to that voice that says, I can't change what I eat. I can't get up earlier. I can't do something every day. I can't do this. This is the illusion that has been put onto all of us to keep us weak, to keep us consumers of things we don't need, to keep us disempowered.
What we can't do.
Yeah. You can. Everyone has that kind of discipline. We all have it deep inside of us. We just have to take that journey and go there and grab it and take it back and own it.
And what we see here at the Soul, what we've created, and I know you do with Laura in your work with Deep Yoga, is create a community so that when someone's legs are feeling weak, that they can't do it, there's someone right next to them that'll hold them up and say, look, I believe in you. You can do this, which is what community is about.
Absolutely.
Now, Bhava, you have a guitar sitting next to you.
I do.
So obviously, the ancient art of devotional singing. Tell us about what you do, how you open hearts with your song.
Oh, well, when I had the cancer, it had started in my throat. That's where the depleted uranium started to do its work, and so for many years I was mute, as well as crippled.
So you went from being someone who people paid you to talk to be someone you could not
Who could not speak. I actually had to type my requests on a computer screen, and for a while I had a thing called a chatterbox around my neck, which was this big, heavy speaker and a little microphone here, and I would talk, and I sounded like Darth Vader.
Wow.
Like I'd swallowed Darth Vader, and so I began to sing at the end of my classes once I started teaching in Shavasana, and just very simple little things, because I had listened to a lot of mantra, a lot of things like Krishna Das during my healing journey, and I would memorize a few phrases, and then as I kept doing that, I started taking mantras and singing them and adding my own English lyrics and doing my own very simple little compositions.
Have you always played guitar?
Yeah.
No, I played a little bit in college because I wanted to be Neil Young, and but I never really went anywhere with it, and I picked it back up as I was healing, and I found a lot of peace in just being able to listen to the music.
And you have a CD or two?
I do. I have one called Flowing with Shiva that was composed in India and Rishikesh, and then another one should be out soon.
Nice.
Well,
Is this a song maybe from the new release?
The new. Oh, I'm asking we end all hurt and hate. I'm asking our hearts be open wide. I'm asking we find a better way. I'm asking we move to the other side. And I'm praying we all come home to truth. Yes, I'm praying our souls lift on high. I'm praying we all see what to do. I'm praying we move to the other side, other side. There's a place I know is evermore. Oh, there's a place I know. All we need is to open up the door. Oh, yes, there's a place I know. Oh, yes, I know. Here comes our Sanskrit. Om aham, aham prema. Om aham, shanti, oh, I am peace. Om aham, aham prema. Om aham, shanti. Shanti, Shanti.
thank you so much, Bhava, for joining us tonight and for sharing your story.
And it's inspired me more to not let anyone make any excuses anymore. That come in here and say, oh, you know, my elbow, my shoulder. Not after hearing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. You two are doing such amazingly beautiful work and helping so many souls find their way. And I love you both so much, and it's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Namaste.
Thanks.
Moji.
Moji.
Remember when I said someone said, "Get up, Daddy"? He's now 14 and
There he
bigger
is.
and stronger than me.
Right?
Yeah,
Tell me he didn't come down in the nick of time.
in the nick of time.
They were talking about how he's got Daddy's voice.
Yeah.
Moji.
Love you, Moji.